It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com. You can get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator, at emailrevealer.com. Also, adoption investigations, asset searches, locates, email tracing, catch your spouse cheating online. Give us their email address. We trace it back to online dating websites and personal ads. Emailrevealer.com. Show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea. I cannot recommend this tea to you enough. If you try, just put up some new pictures up on my Facebook page. You can see some, well, not before and after pictures, but you see some after pictures. Okay? Because I don't want you to see the before pictures. I lost close to 25 pounds since I started taking this, drinking this stuff. You drink it in the morning. You don't need any coffee. I've been doing my Daniel fast. I've been swimming. Just went swimming today. Hiking, biking, exercising. My complexion is cleared up. I'm feeling good. My digestion is better. Again, weight loss, and just feeling healthier in every possible way. No longer drinking coffee. Get up in the morning, drink a glass of this cold herbal tea, and get the day off right. Got an interesting show for you again. We covered the Son of Sam case many times from many different angles on this show. Today we have a friend from Ireland, across the pond there, as they like to say. Okay, now we have a big Irish audience. We have Neal Boyle, and he just produced a documentary called Son of Kerry, Son of Sam. Mr. Boyle, are you there?
Hi, Ed. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell the audience, who is Neal Boyle?
Who am I? I'm an Irish independent filmmaker. I've worked primarily in documentary for over 20 years now. So I'm always on the lookout for something interesting. A lot of foreign stuff, it would be a norm for Irish people to look abroad because we have such a broad diaspora, and America is always a big pull as well. I think the first thing I did when I started working for a documentary company 20-odd years ago was Stories from Irish America, which was a 16-part series about the Irish in America, and that was fantastic, you know. So I stayed working. I initially was a cameraman. I worked my way up to becoming a producer-director, and now that's what the business is. I make documentaries for Irish TV.
And your website is iwrmedia.com, and if people want to get a hold of this film, Son of Kerry, Son of Sam, you should go to that website and contact Neal Boyle and work out a little deal with him. It's just screened there in Ireland, just recently screened. It's just in early May, so it just came out. Now, what caught your attention to the Son of Sam case?
Well, I suppose I'm always on the lookout for a story that I can tell, and you know, and anybody who's in independent production out there will know. You have to look at how you can finance something, and in Ireland, it's usually Irish interest is what catches a broadcaster's attention. If an Irish audience is interested in it, then you can tell the story. So a couple of years ago, I just came across an article online that said that the man responsible for catching the Son of Sam was from Kerry in Ireland. And I thought, right, okay, do I believe that or not? I'm not sure. It's worth checking out because Son of Sam is, everybody's heard of Son of Sam. I'm approaching 50 now, but, you know, it is a household name now. And that's how big the case was 40 years ago. So I thought it's worth checking out. Was he a cop who was just, you know, in the area? Was he there for the arrest? Was he something more senior? Was he, as they're saying, the guy who was responsible? So I checked him out, and Timothy Dowd was a deputy inspector, and he ended up being in charge of a mega task force, which was set up specifically to track down the Son of Sam, or the 44 caliber killer, as he was in the beginning called. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. This is well worth a look at. And, you know, to get this type of documentary made, you look at the broadcasters in your country and see who would be interested in telling this type of a story. He's from Kerry, the broadcaster here that would be kind of popular on the West Coast would be the Irish language station, TG4. So I approached them and straight away they were interested. They said, yeah, this is a great story. We're interested. How are you going to tell it? And what's the focus of the story? And I said, well, the story focus is going to be on Tim Dowd. Now, Tim obviously has passed away. So you have to figure out how to tell that story and get into it. Then I began researching, and obviously first port of call was to contact the family and see if they'd be supportive, because they would be, their blessing makes it possible, So that's how the initial interest came, from that, finding that a Kerry man was involved in the Son of Sam case. And it just went from there. I started researching, and the more research, as I say, I knew something about the case. But the more research, I just thought, God, this is just such a big story. How can I fit it in and tell it? And also, how can you do justice to Tim Dowd? And not just Tim, but the other detectives, the detectives who worked the case. Tim was a deputy inspector, as I said. He wasn't a detective. But the guys who worked that case, a tough case, a really, really challenging one. And tell that story and get across, just from a police point of view, what it was like to have a nameless killer with stranger-on-stranger attacks, the hardest type of thing to solve in a city like New York. How did they do it? So that's what I thought. I just thought, this is great. This has everything. It's got drama, tension, real-life consequences, and like sinister, everything, textures, darkness. Everything. I just said, this is great. If I can get this documentary made, I know I'm going to really enjoy it. And I have to say, I did. So that's how it came about it.
Now, is this a well-known case in Ireland?
I would say no. We wouldn't have followed the way, say, people in New York would, or even in the States. Would it have been heard of over here? Yeah, people would know Son of Sam. Oh, that was a serial killer. Would they know the details of it? Look, it's 40 years ago. I would not think the name Berkowitz, for example, might not be, attached to Son of Sam here. It wouldn't be that well known. But it's like it's out there in popular culture. If I said to any of my friends, do you know what was Son of Sam? They'd say, it's an American serial killer. I think it was New York. So it's there. It's in the popular culture. It's still alive here. Obviously, it's much stronger in New York. And when we were filming, we did some vox pops with ordinary New Yorkers. And that was fascinating, just how much they knew about the case and could remember the tension in the city at the time. But in Ireland, yeah, we would definitely know Son of Sam was a New York-based serial killer, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm 55 years old, and I grew up in the Bronx. So right. I was right in the middle of all this, and because it was on the local news, 24, it was on constantly. And like you said, too, in your documentary, it's, I really appreciate, too, how you captured the confusion of the time period and the chaos of the time period, and how the police were overwhelmed, and how they had those press conferences every single day with nothing to report. There was really nothing new overnight, Fascinating time.
It was. I suppose if you look at it in terms of the press interest, it was a huge media story when they finally put together that there were that there was one man behind these killings. And it was, after the fourth attack, they were, beginning to suspect that, maybe there was one person behind it. And you have to think about, look, this was back in the mid-70s. The amount of technology, how connected everybody was, even having a mobile phone, all of that just wasn't, at the level that we accept and expect today. There were, in 1976, there were over 1,600 homicides in New York. So random unconnected killings weren't automatically kind of joined together. And you have to say fair play to the NYPD. After the fourth killing, the only link was that the caliber bullet looked to be the same, a 44 caliber from a Charter Arms Bulldog snub-nose revolver. But ballistics wasn't making a positive match. So once they put it together, and the fifth homicide, Virginia Voskerichian, that bullet matched the first one, so they made that link. And then, as Joseph Burley, who I interviewed, who was deputy to Tim Dowd, said, George Simmons in ballistics said that if A plus B and B equals A, then, B equals A equals C. So that's how they joined them all together. And proved that, yes, there was one guy involved in these cases. And Joseph Burley said, you kind of have to look at it and say, you have to tell the public, the public has to be warned. Now, it wasn't his or Tim Dowd's decision as head of the task force, but once the public, or the press got hold of the idea that there was a serial killer in New York killing people randomly, and the story it was like putting a match to a flame, putting a flame to a fire. It was just whoosh, the media interest just kicked off big time, and the competition between, the newspapers for that story and for getting the audience to buy more papers. It fueled the fear in the city, definitely. As you say, you were in the Bronx, first attack was in the Bronx, and the Bronx and Queens were where most of the attacks happened. So people definitely still remember what that was like back then, the amount of media interest, and it was continually stoking it and looking for more information and a constant demand for more to fill newspaper inches. They needed to print something. There had to be an answer every day. And as Jared Shevlin, one of the detectives, said, he said, we had nothing. We truly had nothing. It couldn't have been darker. And yet the media are still demanding more and more and more information. So they were having to come up with, what are we putting out today? And, Tim Dowd, as head of the investigation, put himself forward as being the guy who would manage the media and keep them away from the detectives, leave the detectives to follow up on the cases and work the job and not be, swamped by media requests. And that is, I suppose, in one to his credit, and he wasn't a glory hog or anything like that. After the case, he just stood back from the limelight, never did book stones, anything like that. It wasn't his style. He was interested in just getting the case to a successful conclusion, and part of that was managing the media so his guys could get out there and do the day job of actually trying to track down all the leads they were getting from the phone calls. And that was all stoked up by the media as well. I suppose the idea that you could get randomly shot just because you were going out to a pub or a disco or wherever meant that you were looking at, maybe it's that strange guy down the corner. Maybe it's, I have an ex-husband who's a bit of a, don't like him, he's quirky, he's odd. I spoke to George Moscadini. He's not in the documentary, but he was a detective on the case in the early days. His partner, John O'Connell, was interviewed in the documentary, and George said it was anybody and everybody was being turned in as a potential killer, and everything had to be followed up on.
Yeah, it also...
Riley said, that the chief of police couldn't get in to talk to Tim Dowd on a phone line because the phone lines were jammed up. They had to put in a separate line. The phone just rang incessantly. He said it was just constant, all day, every day. The phone rang with tips,
It also didn't help that they had all these different sketches, and they were all of different people.
Yeah, well, the first killing, the first attack, which, resulted in a homicide, the Donna Lauria attack, Jody Valenti gave quite a detailed description of the killer, and there was an artist sketch produced from that. After that, Carl Danaro didn't see who shot him. Rosemary Keenan didn't. That was the second attack. They didn't have any witnesses from that one. But as the cases went on, different people saw a guy in the area. Sometimes the victims kind of half remembered. But none of the descriptions and none of the artist sketches, the police sketches, matched each other. So as the case went on, as I said, Jerry Shevlin, the detective, one of the detectives said to me, and it's in the documentary, we had nothing, truly nothing. And he said that none of the sketches matched. John O'Connell said that was one of the big frustrating things. He said they were just useless. The sketches were, misleading because you're looking at how many people, from these sketches, how many people could they be? I don't know, like hundreds of thousands. So that was a big frustration, that they never really had a solid line on what type of a person, other than a very broad description: white, male, maybe 6 foot, maybe shorter, maybe big, maybe not. Different descriptions gave him a slightly thin, taller, smaller. So it was a broad spectrum of some sort of a white male, 20s to maybe 40s. But even at that, and I was impressed by the detectives that I spoke to in this case, that they had such open-mindedness in how they're approaching the case. Even at that, it could have been anybody outside that description either. So all all avenues were left open, and the sketches didn't help. It didn't narrow it down for them. That was one of the big problems that they had.
Now, when you talk to all these different detectives, did they have an explanation of why all the sketches were so different?
I think that John O'Connell said to me, and it's not in the documentary, but it was part of when we were talking about it before we recorded. It was either John or Jared Shevlin said, ask someone a week after
right.
they see something what they saw, and particularly in a moment when it was high drama, the description will change. They start to think what they saw as opposed to what they actually saw, and things shift in your head. They said it's natural, and it's something that they're trying to deal with. But when you're looking at, like, you're looking for very specifics, what he said is like, was there a scar? Was there something that will make him stand out as opposed to the broad general description? But the fact, I suppose, that Sam crept up from behind, he shot through the passenger window. It was normally couples who were engaged, kind of, they were making out or whatever it was, Carl Danaro said he was. They weren't really aware of what was outside. And, when a gun gets shot at you, that's it. Your attention is heightened, and it's also you're stunned. And the attacks were all quick. They weren't slow. They weren't brazen, except for the Virginia Voskarician one where he walked straight up to her, straight on. But she died at the scene, so there was no, witness statement out of that from her. For example, she would have had, she was like basically facing him when he shot her. So it's understandable that they, didn't get a clear view of the killer. Obviously, he was sneaking. He didn't want to be caught. And one of the interesting things as well is, and there's an interview with Tim Dowd, and he's asked, why does the killer go after courting couples, and is that what his modus operandi is, lovers' lanes? And Tim says, and it shows that he was a very broad-minded person. He says, no, it's not, a lover's lane is a place where couples get together to do what they have always done since time immemorial, is the way he puts it. And he said, in that instance, you will have a few people, maybe a few cars there, and that's not what he's looking for. He's looking for a quiet place, a lay-by, somewhere where one car would be, or one couple, or he's an opportunist. And it wasn't just couples and cars, but the media the media were branding and labeling things to drive the story. It was couples and cars he was going for. It was lovers' lanes and stuff. But in reality, 2 women were shot on their front doorstep. Virginia was shot at 7 in the evening on a street. Other ones were in cars. He was an opportunistic killer looking for people who were vulnerable because they were on their own. Everyone except the last attack, which you could say that one was Lover's Lane. There was a couple of other cars in the area with couples in them. But he avoided that. And I think it's interesting that, Tim was, not allowing the labeling or the idea of what, the press were sort of saying it's this, and, that's what we have. The police were very clearly saying it's not that. We're looking at a much broader spectrum of locations, which, makes it harder for them as well, because New York is big enough. It would be great if it was only Lover's Lanes, but it was anywhere and everywhere. And that's one of the big challenges that this case had for them. Stranger on stranger, and wherever people were out alone, he was an opportunistic killer. That was the challenge they faced. And as you said, the sketches didn't match. And yeah, that was it. That was the challenge. That was the big challenge of this case.
You interviewed Carl Danaro, you mentioned. And I've had Carl on the show, I think more than once, a couple of times. And I'm also part of that whole Maury Terry Facebook group with Carl. And now Carl is convinced that there was a cult involved and there were multiple shooters. Now, did he mention that to you off the, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he chewed your ear off, as a matter of fact. What did Carl have to say about that, his theory in regards to that?
Well, Carl said, look, there's too many things with the case after, and it wasn't something he became aware of until much later. Obviously, he was following it right from the start because, he was shot in the head and survived, thank God.
Yeah.
But he did say, that, it was his opinion, and he firmly believes that there were other people involved. Now, it wasn't part of my story. My story was the police investigation, and I didn't study that and research it. But I do know what came up during the course of the investigation was a yellow Volkswagen popped up as a possible car at a few of the locations. For example, like the first killing in the Bronx, there was reports of maybe somebody sitting in a yellow car. It was described as a yellow car, not a yellow Volkswagen. But I think at 3 or 4 of the other killings, people, were who's in the area, who saw cars moving, whatever. Yellow Volkswagen came up, and in the last killing in the Bronx, a yellow car was seen, Volkswagen was seen, leaving the scene. So the police were convinced that there was someone in a yellow Volkswagen. Of course, they catch Berkowitz, he doesn't own a yellow Volkswagen. Who was in the yellow Volkswagen? And Carl said, as I said, I haven't looked into this in detail. It wasn't part of the story I was telling, which was broad enough as it was. I mean, those killings were over, 13 months. So there was a lot of detail. But there were other aspects of the case too, which I'm not up on. I can't talk about it with any authority. But Carl was saying there's a lot more that links the idea that Berkowitz might have been attached to a satanic cult, for example. And there was one in the area where he was living. And yeah, it's possible. I mean, can't say with any authority that I think it's credible or not. But I know Carl does, and he's done a lot more research. And as I say, he knew Terry Murray. He's looked at all of that information, and he said to me, Terry nails it in his book. He gets it right, and he believes that it's there and it's a possibility.
Yeah, you're talking about the book, The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, which really is thoroughly researched and it was in real time. A lot of the stuff that came out during that book was coming out in real time. Deaths of witnesses and stuff. And we're here with Neal Boyle. The film we're talking about is Son of Kerry, Son of Sam. You can get in contact with Neal through his website, iwrmedia.com. We'll be right back. And now a word from our sponsors.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing you narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find a link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What about your crap? I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with director-producer Neal Boyle. Just came out with a film, Son of Kerry, Son of Sam, and it aired over there in Ireland, and you can catch it. I'm going to have a link in the description on Spreaker and iHeart and YouTube and all that kind of stuff, where you can click on a link and you can watch for the next 20 days or so. Son of Kerry, Son of Sam. If you really want to be taken back to the feel of the 70s, there's a lot of archival news footage that I've never seen before, as a matter of fact, in this film. But again, Neal, when you talk to these detectives like Borelli and these guys, did any of them bring up this idea that there were more people involved or anything like that?
No, they didn't. And I did ask, I asked Joseph Borelli, I said, what do you think of that? And he said, look, and this was afterwards when we were shooting The Breeze, because I said, the documentary was about the investigation and the challenges they faced. It wasn't, once they caught Berkowitz, my story ended. But, you know, their feeling was that all of the killings were a .44 caliber revolver. They got the gun. Berkowitz had a letter. Ballistics matched the gun to Berkowitz's gun. Handwriting expert, I can't remember his name, matched the handwriting. They did a photo spread and sent it up to Jodie Valenti in the Bronx. She said if she ever saw the guy who shot at her, and this was the very first killing, if she ever saw him, that she would be able to identify him. So when they sent that up, she immediately said, yeah, that's the guy. And that was kind of a slam dunk from their point of view. And I suppose if you look at it from another perspective, there were never any other Son of Sam attacks or anything like it in the months afterwards. Like, nobody took up the mantle and continued the killings. So did they catch the shooter? They would say, yeah, 100% positive they had the guy. Plus he confessed, David Berkowitz, the minute they stopped him, John Filatico said, identify yourself, who are you? And Jerry Shevlin says Filatico was taken aback because Berkowitz didn't say, my name is David Berkowitz. He said, I'm Son of Sam. And as Jerry Shevlin said, that's the quickest confession you could ever have. Now, they still had to make the case thick to be sure that they'd get a solid conviction. They hadn't at that stage run the ballistics or done the photo spread. But straight off the bat, that was it. He wasn't David Berkowitz, he was Son of Sam. And, from their point of view, you have to say, yes, did they catch the guy who did those killings? Yes, they did. Was there other people involved? There was nothing to indicate to them, I would think. Now, actually, I'm sort of saying that. They didn't say that to me. But the killings ended. They had the guy, he confessed. I think they were happy that they had stopped the killings. And the proof of that is that they didn't continue, I suppose. So I would say that they're happy that they got the job they set out to do. They got it done.
So none of the other detectives have brought up the idea that they felt as strongly as Carl Danaro feels.
No, they didn't. Okay. And in fairness, if I was telling that story, I would have pushed a lot. I would have interviewed them on those points, and I would have studied the stuff that Carl Danaro and Terry Murray had put together. But as I said, that wasn't the story. And I know it would be great to hear that it was still alive and there was, detectives felt there was, but none of them did, no. They were happy that they got their guy, like they really were. And I know Tim Dowd was too. As Tim Dowd's son Chuck, who was in the NYPD himself, he actually rose to a higher rank than Tim did. And he said they had the guy, they had the gun, they had the ladder. He said they were sure. They had the right guy. It was job done. And, the main aim, and, Tim Dowd's daughter Melissa says as well, it was they just wanted to stop the killing. That was what they wanted. And I think once they had him and they had the gun and they'd made all those ballistic matches, he'd confessed. The confession, was on record. He never said he didn't do it. That was it. It was,
let me ask you,
point of view, they caught the guy.
The focus of your film is from the perspective of Tim Dowd. It's based on Tim Dowd because he was from Ireland. There's the connection there. Now, but did he do it? Did Tim Dowd do anything else in his career to this? Normally, when you got these guys in these high-profile cases, kind of insert themselves into other high-profile cases, but that's not the case with Tim Dowd, is it?
Well, it depends on what you call a high-profile case. I mean, Son of Sam was at the end of his career. He retired shortly afterwards with a double promotion for, successfully leading that case to a close. Tim had been involved in a case with a drug dealing case in Chinatown, which many people saw as being impossible to solve. And he did, after months of investigation, managed to, arrest the head of this organized criminal gang called the Flying Dragons. And people felt that, that was an amazing feat because Westerners trying to infiltrate a Chinese criminal organization was felt to be something that was just not going to be possible for someone to do, but he managed to do it and arrested the leader on a charge of murder for murdering a rival gang member's, lead. They were called the Ghost Shadows. Okay. And David Warren was the victim. And that effectively ended that gang's activity in Chinatown. And that was seen as quite a big case. And I don't know if that was, somebody said he was connected to the French Connection and drug ring. I don't know whether the Flying Dragons were receiving drugs through that trade route or not. But that was, did he have other huge high-profile cases? No. And I suppose you have to say, or not to my knowledge, but how did he get involved in Son of Sam anyway? Because that was a big case. And I think it was because you have to remember, Dowd came into the police force in 1940, and that was during the Depression. 3,000 people applied for 300 places. So only the creme de la creme, the very best, got in. And Joseph Borelli, when I was talking to him, he said, he came in that 1940s class. The class of 1940 was known as exceptionally talented people. So he was part of that group, working their way up through the ranks, and having careers that put them on tough cases. And Tim ended up on the Son of Sam case because the first killing was in the Bronx, and the next three were in Queens. And it was after the fourth killing that Captain Borelli was a captain in I think it was the 9th homicide, and he had the homicide squads under him. And George Simmons in ballistics had passingly made a remark to, I think it was Joe Coffey, was dealing with them on one of the killings, probably the Donna DeMasi Joanne Limio attack, which was the third one. And Simmons said, I'd seen this caliber, this style of, attack in another case up in the Bronx. And Coffey said it to Borelli, and Borelli said, right, let's put a call out everywhere, see if anybody has anything that matches this. And they, brought together the first 4 killings that these all seemed to match the pattern. And that's when they first had the inkling that, that they were all connected. So the problem was that the first killing was in the Bronx, the next 3 were in Queens, and the Bronx and the Queens both wanted to be the lead in the case. They didn't at that stage have a system to coordinate over the 2 boroughs. So there was a little bit of a rift developing there. And Joseph Borelli said, like, the solution was to bring in an outsider. So, you know, Tim Dowd was chosen as the outsider, someone who was impartial, wouldn't be either Queens or the Bronx, and that would keep everybody happy. Now, as it happens, Tim came in, and John O'Connell, one of the detectives I interviewed, said, you know, Tim said, okay, come with me. They were looking for somewhere to base Omega, because Omega wasn't particularly Queens or Bronx. It was both. It was all of New York. It was, I think, probably one of the first completely all of New York task forces. And it was going to turn into the biggest manhunt that New York had ever had. But he went to the 109th, and there was a room upstairs which just had a clerk in it. And John said, he walked in, Tim had a look, said, yeah, this will do. And he said, you pack your stuff and get out. That was it. The task force had arrived. So it was based in the 109th on the first floor. And that's where they operated out of, and that's how Tim got involved. But he was known as being meticulous, as being a detailed guy, as being someone who was from, as I say, that great class of 1940. And I think, you know, you don't get handed a case like a serial killer if you're not capable of leading a team. So all of that stands to him. Did he have a stellar career before that? He had cases that he had successfully brought to a close that were very difficult, like that Chinatown one with the flying dragons. So, you know, he wasn't a limelight hogger either. So, you know, as people have said, and I've done a lot of research on him, and it's come up in a couple of books that Tim Dowd, a story has never been done, that we don't really know much about him. And he was offered book deals after the case, his family said. You know, there were films made about Son of Sam. He didn't act as an advisor on them or anything like that. He wasn't looking for it. He was just a cop's cop. It was like, catch the guy, get the case to a successful conclusion, move on. Very detailed orientated, as I said, very pragmatic. And that's, I think, you know, you need that sort of a person when you're handling a case that's going to be that broad with that many moving parts. And by that, I mean the amount of detectives, the scale of it, and I think the type of mind that you have to bring. Back in the 70s, when there wasn't, as I say, computer, internet, even mobile phones, the type of mind that you have to bring to catching someone in that old-style way that detectives worked. And I have to say, speaking to the other detectives, I'm, you know, very impressed with their attitude towards how you catch someone, how they dealt with that case. I know they all worked horrendous hours. Everybody wanted this to end, but the level of detail that they would go to, and you know how diligent they were in looking at everything. Jared Shevlin said, like, they had a psychologist on the case, Harvey Schlossberg, and I spoke to Harvey on the phone, but Jerry Shevlin said to me, you know, you don't make an arrest on a profile. And he said, I'm not saying the profile isn't right, but it's not right either. So the profile says the guy, he's a young guy, he's in his 30s, he's a loner, he doesn't mix well, he keeps to himself. That's 300,000 people in the city. That's no use to me. So they were the challenges they were looking at, and those detectives, they're very straight about that. And you just know these guys are serious men. You know, they're good at their job. They're also well used to this type of work. And Dowd as well, when he was given that task force, he was told he had the pick of whoever he wanted. So he pulled together the best people. Now, O'Connell and Shevlin were already part of the task force. Borelli had set up a small unit dedicated to those first 4 or 5 homicides before Omega was announced and Tim Dowd was brought in. But he had the pick of the best to bring in and put on to work in Omega. So, yeah, they were, and their memories and their recollections 40 years later, the details of the case, of how they tracked it down, of each of the crime scenes, of what they came across, was really impressive, you know?
It's when you think back to the 70s, the crime scene investigation was so different. I don't even think they had crime scene tape, you know? I think they would just walk in and out of the crime scene, and different detectives would just handle all the evidence and stuff. Even crime evidence bags. I don't think they had evidence bags back in those days. That when they showed up at a crime scene, it was just totally different.
Yeah, it was a different. Well, you know, today you'd say you don't want to damage any of the forensics. Back then, the forensics weren't as developed as they are today. So, as John O'Connell says, no DNA, and it wasn't the technology that could, deliver a result back then. So, Jared Shevlin said when he arrived at the Brooklyn homicide, Robert Biolanti was already gone in the ambulance. He survived. Stacey Moskowitz was still in the car. She died at the scene. And he said, until the coroner has to come and release the crime scene. So he's to pronounce the person dead, say now you can get at the crime scene. So there is, as Jared said, there is a routine when you get to a crime scene. There are things you have to do in the right order. But the order of what they did back then and how they handled the crime scene is different to how you would do it today. And that's, a lot of it is because of how technology and forensic science has moved on and the type of tools you can bring to bear. I mean, look at it this way. After the first letter, was the first letter? No, it was the Breslin letter, the second letter. After the second letter, they had two partial fingerprints and a partial palm. If that was today and that person was in the database, you'd have an arrest that day. Back then, Jared Shevlin was very straight about it. He said, you had to have the warm body beside you to make a match. He said, you could type that fingerprint in all day into the system. It would not match up. It just wasn't, the technology wasn't there. So, you're down to comparing partial tips with paper files of fingerprints with magnifying glasses. That's the reality of what it was back then. So there were handicaps, but they're only handicaps if you know in the future what's going to make things easy for you. I mean, the type of technology that's in New York today, particularly post 911, is, astounding. Like gunshot sensors and everything. The minute a gunshot's heard, like we had to have NYPD on location when we were filming the reconstructions. Now we were using a gun, but we weren't firing blanks. But if we were firing blanks, it would have triggered a response that there's a gunshot in an area, and the NYPD would have known within minutes, and there would have been cars dispatched, ready for, potentially a deadly situation. But, that's how extreme the difference is. But, I suppose today we're saying these are the things we're looking at. In 40 years' time, we'll be looking back saying, God, forensic science, it had really come on. But imagine if they had today. They were so handicapped. Today we think, great, we got all these great tools. Back then they had diligence and they had really smart cops. Not that we own today, but back then they did work in a very methodical way. And you spoke to Carl Danaro. Carl was the second attack. At the time, it wasn't known that it was part of a serial killing. They assumed, or one of the theories was that Carl was a drug dealer because, he had long hair and he did smoke a bit of pot. But, he was 20. Who didn't? So that was one of the theories. But at the same time, even though that was a theory, they also came up with a list of everybody in his circle, everybody in the area who'd ever had any kind of a prior or they'd ever come across. And they came to him and they said, do you know any of these people? Any of them have a grudge against you? Like, they weren't just saying, this is our theory, this is the single thing we're pinning it on. They were, I think, diligent cops and detectives who were saying, okay, this is a theory we have. In the case of Carl Danaro, possible drug link. But what are the other options? And they were pulling up all these names. They were looking at everything. And that was the style of police work back then. In the Donna Lauria Jody Valenti attack, which was the first one in the Bronx, one of the theories was that it could be mob-related because mob activity had increased in the area. And that was how they were looking at these things. Where was the motive? What was the motive? And the funny thing, through the whole case, there was never a motive. Like, there just wasn't. It was random. It was random killing. Once they knew it was a serial killer, all of those theories went away. But the police were looking at everything. And when they knew it was a random killer, it was a single guy traveling around with a 44 caliber bulldog gun, they continued to look at all options and everything. So every tip that came in, and this was one of the problems with how public this case became, every tip that came in had to be followed up on, and in the old way. And if you think about it, you want to know, like, who lives in a house these days. A couple of seconds on your iPhone will get you the answer. Back then, paper records, that was the reality of, how much time had to be given to every single lead, and every lead had to be followed up. Joseph Borelli said that Tim and him came up with a method of investigation that they called the 3I method of investigation. He said, we gave it a fancy name because it sounded good. And it's exactly the sort of thing that Timothy Dowd would have, come up with, which was when the leads came in, they would say, what's immediate, like should be given to a detective as soon as they come in. What's important, which is get the immediate stuff out of the way, get onto the important ones, clear all of those, do those. Detectives will go out and follow down those people, find out where they were when the shootings happened, see if they fit the profile, all that kind of stuff. Just, they were the hot leads. And then the third was ignore. The third pile was ignore. And Joseph Borelli said, and which did me and Tim look at? We looked at ignore. Well, the cops were out doing the good leads. They were looking at goods. And the idea that Tim said, nothing can slip through. Everything is in unless we've fully disqualified it. And his own son, Chuck, said, his attitude was, when a killing happens, everybody in that area is a suspect, everybody. And if you had the name of everybody in that area, then you had the name of the killer. So all you have to do is work your way through those names, cancel off each one as you go until eventually you get to the killer. Now, this is New York. What was the population back then? Was it 15 million? Probably. I don't know. But it's, that was a hell of a job to be faced with,
Yeah, especially to be doing it by hand where you can't scrub it with these computer databases like you have now. Let's take another commercial break. We're with Neal Boyle, the director and producer of Son of Kerry, Son of Sam. You can get a hold of this through his website, iwrmedia.com, but also, too, there's going to be a link in our description, and you can get a copy of this. And I really do encourage people to go back. Even you put on the subtitles because they talk in Irish sometimes. You can't understand. But just to get a flavor back of New York City back in the 70s, is a lot of archival footage that The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Get the Tea, your best defense.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here with Neal Boyle, who's the producer-director of Son of Kerry, Son of Sam. You can find it at, contact them through iwrmedia.com. Another thing, too, I enjoyed about the film is, and I think it's so important when you look back at that time, is the blackout and the riots that took place, especially in the Bronx at the time. And there is such a connection between that and the Son of Sam. Now, but how would you know that from Ireland? Did the cops bring that up and say, hey, boy, then we had this riot? Is that how that came about?
It's funny. I asked about the riot. When I was researching it, the riots were mentioned. And, I liked the Spike Lee film, what was his called, Summer of Sam? Yeah. But the idea that summer was a baking hot summer, and it was like a tinderbox. And those riots, it seemed like, and I know, look, the city gets hot, tensions get a little frayed and all that. And then there's a blackout and, looting and riots start and all that. I was curious to know, did that put more pressure on them? I mean, they were already stretched. That investigation had gone up to 300 detectives and how many other people work in the case as well from ordinary police, and then suddenly you have riots and the Bronx on fire and stuff like that. And I said, did that put more pressure on you? Did it really interfere with the investigation? Did you worry that you would miss another killing during that? And I kind of said, no, they didn't think of it in that kind of way. Obviously it wasn't a Son of Sam related event, but it was something that they had to deal with at the time. So while it's part of the texture and the color of that year, and it was one of the bigger events to hit the media, what it did do was put more pressure on the Mayor Beam, and the police department to do their jobs right and to, get control of a tough situation. And Son of Sam was in that mix. And there's a great conference with Mayor Beam, and he's angry, and he says, I'm damned angry, And it's not really funny because, they were, dealing with a random killer. It's like another attack from the .44 caliber killer, which is a label that the press had put on Son of Sam in the early days before he wrote his first letter. Looting, and in that footage that you saw of that of the riots that I got, the cops, and I have it in the opening. They're there were shots fired, and the presenter goes on. You can't hear it because of the voiceover, but he says were there shots fired at you? And they said, yeah. Shots fired at police. So they were, under severe pressure. And for someone like the mayor and, police commissioner, the real pressure with them would have been to, assure the people of New York that they, were capable of doing their job, that they were able to keep the city safe. So, Son of Sam was in that mix as part of one of the big challenges that they were facing. And like an impossible one, stranger on stranger, random killer in a city the size of New York. And I didn't appreciate how big New York was, because anytime I've been there in the past, it had primarily been in Manhattan. But on this one, we stayed in the Bronx and we drove, all over out to Long Island, to where some of the, Joseph Burley and James Justice live out in Long Island, and we were up, and Tim's family still live up in Yonkers, in that area. And but the scale and traveling around Queens to the different crime scenes, it was how you could face the task of catching someone with that broad spread is unreal. So, yeah, the riots and the looting and, that blackout was just another pile of pressure heaped onto, and it would have filtered down to Tim. Tim is the person that's the lead of that investigation. It's like anything. The buck stops somewhere, and, the chief of police and the police commissioner and, would have been, constantly on Tim saying, where are we? How are we doing? Where are we going? So he would have shielded the team from that sort of political pressure. And I asked anybody I spoke to, was Tim Dowd under pressure? They said, we never knew. It never filtered down to us. He always kept that to himself. But you can imagine it must have been immense. It must have been really, really big,
Oh, yeah. Neal, we're out of time. What do you want to leave us with? You've only got a couple of minutes left.
All right. Well, where do I want to leave it?
I know.
Look, I think, Tim Dowd was an Irish American, and, he came and he served the police in the city that adopted him and took him in. And his role really in his career and with the Son of Sam case was to make the city safe. He wasn't a glory hunter. He wasn't looking for praise or anything like that. He was just competent, extremely bright, meticulous. And I think that sort of influence of the Irish in America and how they've served in America is what I think this documentary is really about. And I think Tim is an exemplary example of the best of, what Irish Americans have to offer American society then and still today, So I'd like to leave it as, I'd also like to say, look, everybody who was on the team, Joseph Borelli in the early days before Tim was involved, had pieced it together. Jerry, John O'Connell, who I interviewed, everybody I talked to, but particularly George Shevlin, who passed away 2 months ago, just to say a huge thanks to all those guys for talking to me. And I hope they're happy that this documentary has reflected the huge challenge they had and the success they had in solving the case.
Neal Boyle, son of Kerry, son of Sam, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Good night. Okay, they had Neal Boyle, son of Kerry, son of Sam. I'm going to do something different after this show. I'm going to do a little commentary that'll be up in the members section. And I'm going to start doing this with pretty much all my interviews after this because I got a ton of notes here, different things I wanted to ask and talk about that I didn't get a chance to get in. So that'll be like a new feature we'll have here. Then when I do these interviews, we'll have a commentary, like a half hour, that'll be up in the members section. That you can either purchase or join and become a member, which we really need members, by the way, right now. In fact, we have no funds to continue for next month right now. That's where we are right now. And I started early this month. I started way before the 15th, trying to explain to the audience that we need funding to keep the show going. And the way to fund the show is to become a member. You send me, contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com. I'll give you 13 months membership for $60. If you're already a member, we'll add the 13 months to your existing membership. You won't lose any time. If we don't get the memberships, I can't continue doing this. It's just as simple as that. We just sent out an email last night, and all I get is a bunch of, the only people that comment back are people insulting me, for begging for money. But I'm doing the show for free. I'm paying for the show to put the show in for you. So I'm asking for support here, guys. Either we don't get the support, the show's over. Nothing we can do. So contact me at oppermanreport.com. You can become a member there. Or if you want a big discount, oppermanreport@gmail.com. And I'm going to be doing something different, like I said. Also, too, if you want to advertise on the show, we got great advertising rates for you. It looks like we're going to be losing our tea sponsor. So if you want to buy some tea, do it right away. And get the tea.com. And tell them, you purchased it because I heard it on the Opera Report. That would help out. But Tim Dowd, the story of Tim Dowd, who's little known NYPD detective, Neal Boyle, son of Kerry, son of Sam. And I really do recommend this documentary, even though it doesn't get into the stuff we normally get into about the son of Sam. It really does pick up the flavor, the archival footage, like seeing the old pictures of Jimmy Breslin when he had his little afro going on there. It's worth it for that alone. That's to check out Neal Boyle, son of Kerry, son of Sam. And there's going to be a link in the description. So once again, too, join the member section. Email me at oppermanreport@gmail.com. I'll hook you right up with a membership. Good night.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation.
And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at Opperman Investigation.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com. You get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Also, all kinds of stuff, acid searches, locates, background checks, adoption investigations. Emailrevealer.com. The show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com, Life Change Tea. Stuff will change your life. You lose weight, help your digestion. It's cleared up my complexion. I'm feeling great on this tea. I wake up in the morning, have one glass of this herbal tea, no coffee. I'm swimming, I'm hiking, I'm biking, losing weight, lost about 25 pounds. GetTheTea.com. You can't go wrong. GetTheTea.com. Check out their supplements they got on there too as well. All right. One of my favorite guests, as always, the legendary A.J. Webberman. My God. A.J. Webberman. I was looking at a little comment he wrote in his new book he just wrote, The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story, and he says he's 73 years old. 73 years old. Where did the time go? A.J. Webberman, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you so much. And this time you're baking some marijuana brownies, you said?
Yeah, marijuana cupcakes.
Cupcakes, marijuana cupcakes.
Each of them has 4 grams of the low-grade Californian in it.
Now, it's not. It's still.
You don't put the real expensive stuff in cupcakes,
right? But it's still not legal there.
$4.80.
Right. But you're in New York, right?
Yep.
And it's not legal there, right?
Who cares?
Well, how do you feel about it being legal? It kind of pisses me off because here in Vegas it's legal, and you got to go to these stores and you wait online. There's 100 people online. They've got wheelbarrows full of money. It kind of pisses me off. How do you feel when you see that?
That's just the way it goes. The law of supply and demand. People have been starved for pot for so long that they're willing to wait online. But as far as the taxing goes, they pay 30% tax in California.
Yeah.
If it becomes legal, I'll tell you one thing: if I sell the pot, I'm not going to pay that tax because the government has persecuted people, thrown them in jail and prison with all kinds of evil people just for smoking weed. They end up with rapists and killers and kidnappers and, gang members, and then they make it legal, and then they expect to make money off of it after the way they've treated people, for so many years, for decades, ever since it was, that they decided, hey, that's a good way to get the blacks. Let's make this stuff illegal because they smoke it all the time. And then we have an excuse to throw them in jail.
Yeah.
And there was a point when, after a while, at the beginning with, reefer madness and this and that, maybe some law enforcement people actually thought it was deleterious. But after a while, they knew it was harmless, and they just busted people like a racket to shake them down, for racist reasons, to appear in court and get overtime. So, the people that did that, they're truly evil because they knew there was nothing wrong with it. And a lot of them smoked it themselves.
Yeah, I got a friend, good friend, family man, wife and kids, and he used to grow pot down in Tennessee, and he's got 25 years, and he's still in prison, like 15, 20 years ago.
Crazy, man. Totally crazy.
Guy was a farmer. He wasn't any kind of gangster, any kind of criminal. He was a farmer. Anyway.
Lock somebody to destroy somebody's life like that, and then they want to legalize it and tax it and then, perpetuate the system with it. Forget it.
Yeah, and not just him, the wife, the kids, the whole family goes to prison.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Now, AJ Webberman.
I did a year in prison.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and even you just posted an article too recently.
An NPC. It wasn't so bad there. In fact, I look back finally on those days.
And who were you in there with? You were with some famous people.
We had a good time, man. I was in with this guy, that sold ecstasy in that church that they had converted into a danceteria.
Sure, okay. The Limelight.
No, he was cool, and everybody there was there. Everybody who was in there was there for drugs or reentry. The reentry was the most populated the prison the most. Is people who came to the United States, got kicked out, came back again, and then they caught them, and they had to do time for reentry. So that was that story. This guy Demetrius Pagoratis, the Greek freak that opened fire, at Santa Fe High School.
Yeah.
He was a copycat of Nickolas Cruz. If you look at his pictures, he has one where he has a headband on with a heart sticking out. And the people that, have formed a cult of personality around Nickolas Cruz, they create pictures, where they put a circle of hearts around his head and little comments like, I love you, and this and that. He did it because he saw all the adulation that Nickolas Cruz got, all the letters and all the women who said they loved him, and so he just decided to copy the guy. That's why he pulled the alarm, the fire alarm. He got that from him. He had pictures of dead frogs on his Instagram page. And he also warned the kids that he liked, he said he was going to give them a break and not shoot them because he wanted his story told. Nickolas Cruz warned his friend Jameson Sneed, asked him before the event, what room are you going to be in? Because he didn't want to air out his buddy that facilitated the whole thing by allowing him by talking his father, James Sneed, into letting him stay at their home and, letting him have bring his guns with him. They were in a locked safe. Now Sneed claims he doesn't know how Nickolas got the key to the safe, but on the initial reports, when the SWAT squad called him, because he thought that Nickolas might be heading to his house to, drop a hammer on his wife, then he said, oh, it must be him because he has one key and I have the other key. Initially, he said that. But then when he realized that would open him up to a lot of liability, he changed his story. But he's being sued civilly anyway. It's the same way with the Greek freak. The father, the guns were kept in a closet. And, he shouldn't have access to them. But he had access to them. But the father will never get prosecuted. It's a misdemeanor in Texas not to have your guns properly secured. But the NRA is just too powerful. And they won't let, they'll put pressure on the prosecutors not to bring charges in these cases. They should bring charges against the parents because that will teach them, you better have those things secured and make sure the kid doesn't have the combination or have a key to the area where the guns are or put trigger locks on your guns or, and, when you leave the house, take them with you. And, and when you come back, put them, make sure you have an eye on them all the time. Of course, you want to be near it, so in case somebody breaks in, you won't have to go and fiddle around with the safe. But, you have to weigh that against certain variables, like whether there's an autistic kid living with you,
Right.
Like Linda Cruz, she knew that, that she knew about Sandy Hook. She knew the kid was autistic, and she knew he was a gun freak, and she didn't do anything about it. And she protected him. When the cops came, she'd always say, "Oh no, it's all been straightened out," or "Don't arrest him." She didn't want to have an arrest record. The same way with Obama's Promise program, where the certain offenses that didn't rise to the extent of a felony were handled by internally in the school through like programs and little disciplinary things rather than being turned over to the cops. So,
wait a minute, but isn't that
in one of these? She lit a bathroom on fire,
right?
And instead of charging him with arson, which would have precluded him from buying a gun, considering if he was convicted, they just let the whole thing slide. And another thing was on the list of stuff you're supposed to deal with were threats. But, there's two kinds of threats. One if it's bodily harm, the other if it's just destruction of property or something of that nature. So it's basically up to the administrator to decide whether the threat level rises to a felony or a misdemeanor. And in this case, this guy, Kevin Greenleaf, he was the so-called security specialist, an ex-jail guard, he decided it didn't rise to the level of a felony, and
But AJ, let me ask you a question.
Reported to the cops.
When I was
this guy Runcie and Scott Israel, or I call Scott Palestine. Runcie, I call Runcie DMC. He's a black Harvard educated Obama supporter. And
okay, but AJ,
because that place is an enclave of liberalism.
Right, but AJ,
Broward County.
When I was a teenager, that's how the high schools used to handle it. I'm 55 years old, and that's how the high schools used to handle it. If you got into a little bit of trouble, they didn't call the cops right away. And would you want this kid, or not this kid because he shot up a school, but your average kid who gets into trouble in school, do you want them to have a police record the rest of their life?
It depends on what they did. If it's possession of marijuana, no. If it's, rape or something like that, sure. Or theft or arson, or dealing heroin, yeah, that's the way it goes. They're not above the law. They don't have any immunity to the law. Okay. It's like people don't want the school to prison pipeline. So all you're going to do is make it worse for the other kids. If you leave these kids in their midst, they'll disrupt their education and they'll victimize them.
Now we're talking about the
go for it.
Okay.
Especially repeated offenses. He's disciplined like 26 times.
No,
for fighting and for lighting the bathroom on fire and doing a whole lot of assaults that they won't even describe what went down. Stalking, threatening, and he didn't, maybe if he tasted what jail was like, it would have dissuaded him from doing what he did.
That's true too, yeah.
Cruz had planned this for a long time, Now, the society, it's too, what do you call it? It's like too over-tolerant. It's too over-encompassing.
Yeah, lenient. And now we're talking about the book, The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story that A.J. Webberman, I think it's under Alan Webberman, just wrote. It's available on Amazon. I'll have a link up there. The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story. Now, A.J.
Yeah, then you got another thing. You got this guy, Andrew Medina, who is a baseball coach and a campus monitor, right?
Okay.
And he saw the miscreant get out of the Uber. He recognized him immediately, had a good description of him, and he saw him carrying a backpack and a large duffel bag. and walking into the school that he had previously been expelled from. And instead, the cops wouldn't release his name, but I called all the different campus monitors, except for the ones that were killed in the attack, of course. And I narrowed it down, and finally he said, yeah, it was me. I was 300 feet away. No, first he says I was 700 feet away. How could I tackle him? Then he says, oh, I was 500 feet. And then finally he says, oh, I was 300 feet. He didn't have to tackle him. He could have just confronted him, done something other than calling, Scott Peterson, and who stood outside with Greenleaf while the shooting was going on, instead of going in there and confronting him, the Broward coward. So this guy he didn't do his duty. He says, oh, I'm just a campus monitor, but any human being he knew what was going down. All the kids did. The minute it happened, they all said, oh, it must have been him.
Now, AJ.
So that's BS too. I tracked down who his mother was, who the miscreant's mother was, and she was some, heroin addict who had a long police record. Deborah Ann Rhodes. And she was a car thief and eventually did time for selling heroin. So he had a bad bloodline.
Well, I thought he had some kind of wealth, though, in his background. Didn't Nickolas Cruz have some kind of wealth in his background?
That was the adopted. The ones that adopted him was like the father and Linda Cruz. I forget the father's name, but the father was a successful Dominican businessman.
Okay.
And the mother was like Estonian or Latvian or something like that. And the father had been married previously, had 3 kids. And they say that Deborah Rhodes was a distant cousin of one of his 3 boys from the first marriage. And that's how Linda found out that she was pregnant and wanted to give up the kid. And so she bought the kid for $50,000 in a private deal.
And now, AJ,
Fed screwed up too, various, a woman from Massachusetts called up and said, gave her the whole shtick, dead animals, threats, he's going to shoot up the school. And the feds decided, oh no, because Obama had appointed people who they're more interested in the, freedom of speech rights, First Amendment rights. And so they said, oh, the woman says, yeah, he says he's planning, he's going to be he wants to be a school shooter. So then the FBI screener says, oh, you mean, that he just wants to do it. He's not planning to do it, but wanting to do it is the first step, and then planning and then carrying out the act. So they were just looking for a way out. Another thing, this guy, Ben Benight, he was a bond bailsman and bail bondsman and a bounty hunter. And he, Cruz posted, I'm going to be a school shooter on his comments on his YouTube page. So he called the feds and they couldn't find the Nickolas Cruz. But I found them in a public database, not named specifically, but under the relatives of Linda Cruz. So they screwed up on that. And
well, let me ask you this:
the shrink screwed up the Jewish psychiatrist Jared Bienfeld and another lady. He was going to be Baker acted. They were going to toss him in the bin for observation. And the guidance counselors, the school wanted it, but the medical, they didn't buy it. They said, oh no, he doesn't have to be. Yeah. I got to check. Let me check my cup.
Okay, good. I'm going to take a commercial break. It's 4 minutes long. Okay, AJ? Okay. Okay, we're here with A.J. Webberman, the notorious Youth International Party, JFK researcher, historical figure, A.J. Webberman, a Dylanologist. The book is The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story. We'll be right back with more of A.J. Webberman and The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find the link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What about your crap? I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with A.J. Webberman. We're talking about the Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story. A.J., you there?
As far as that promise program, Obama's promise program,
right?
You know, if a kid, does something like punches out another kid, and then he gets away with it, he goes to some program where they lecture him, or something of that nature, or He's have to go to detention. I don't know how they punish him, but it's not jail. And he figures, hey, I got away with this. Maybe I can get away with something else. And it kind of moves up the line. Because it's, you can't change, like the whole thing stems from Obama's desire and Holder's desire to, if blacks won't obey the law, then we're going to change the law to obey blacks. And that's no good. That's a breakdown of civilization. And that's what Obama was about, destroying the civilization. He's like programmed to do it.
Let me ask you this. No.
I don't go for the Promise program. Like the kids should see. Maybe they shouldn't. They could get the juvenile records are sealed anyway, so they won't have a record. Most of the time in most states they seal juvenile records. I know they do it in New York State. So that whole idea that the record will follow them through life, and if they get a taste of jail and see what it's about. They might get like scared straight, as they say.
Now, let me ask you a question, because you talk about how the FBI dropped the ball, right? But now, in your life, in A.J. Webberman's life, you've been under FBI investigation, and so am I.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've been under FBI investigation.
Right. Some guys in Madison who were like, into real heavier stuff than I was, they had like FBI file envy. My penis envy. Right. Because my FBI file was bigger than theirs.
Okay, but the thing is but the FBI never, but you know what I mean? Like they have to have a case. They can't just come and arrest you because someone's calling up and saying, I don't like A.J. Webberman. He's saying crazy shit.
Doing all kinds of stuff that was considered terrorism today.
Yeah, right. But that's what I'm saying, though. So how can we expect the FBI to pick up this kid?
You're right. Yeah.
How can we expect the FBI to pick up this kid, Nickolas Cruz, on something so stupid as a YouTube comment?
How could they pick him up? You mean
how can we expect any action from the FBI over a YouTube comment when there's millions of them a day? They get those kind of complaints about internet comments all day long. You know what I mean? Looking back in hindsight, sure, the kid shot up a school. Yeah,
that's what they say. They say, "Oh, we got all of these cranks to call in, and the screeners have to get rid of them first." No, it was a mistake, and the FBI said they're going to discipline the agents that, not the agents, but the call screeners that did this. And they talked it over with the supervisor. They said they couldn't find the name in any public database, but they have private databases.
Yeah, but those databases
narrow it down by age. In other words, look at all the Nickolas Cruzes in America and eliminate the ones that are like over a certain age. And then, the FBI said they should have visited him, and that would have he would have gotten paranoid and thought he was under surveillance all the time. And,
let me ask you this.
They might have dissuaded him. They admitted that was a mistake. As far as my FBI contact went, it said in my FBI file that FBI agents should not make personal contact with me, but only those around me, like my landlord, girlfriend, neighbors, I know.
The same thing happened to me. They contacted my landlord and my neighbors and stuff. But let me ask you a question now. What got you interested? Because normally you're doing serious JFK research, and historical stuff. Now, what got you interested in the school shooting thing? Was it because Cruz had that the neo-Nazi background?
No, I have like an immature personality, and so I identify with these kids that got shot.
Oh, okay. So do you investigate these school shootings? Is this something you do with all of them?
This is the first thing. Okay. This is the first one. Something caught my attention, about this. I really can't say what it was.
Yeah, because I found it out of character with you. Now, in your investigation into this, did you notice anything about that these two had a fascination with Adam Lanza? I think it was Santa Monica, the kid who ran over those people in Santa Monica because he was a virgin.
Adam Lanza was, I have another book out called Autistic Shooters. What's it called?
Oh, really?
Autistic Active Shooters. and it covers Adam Lanza, who was, a total autistic, waste. And he was a Sandy Hook shooter. Then it covers Elliot Rogers.
Elliot Rogers, that's what I was thinking of, right? Sorry.
Yeah, he was the one you're thinking of. And he was also autistic and a misogynist.
Right.
And he started a whole cult. That guy in Manassian in Toronto said Elliot Rogers is God before he ran over all those women. Because Elliot Rogers had some manifesto. Like, the thing with Elliot Rogers is he puts out his manifesto on Friday night, right? And he says the day of retribution is going to be Saturday. So the parents contact his shrink, that they had all the time watching him. And the shrink says, the psychologist, not a shrink, says, oh, he's autistic, and autistic people stick to their schedule. So I don't have to report this within 24 hours, And so then the Lee Chin and the Roger guy, they decide they're going to drive there and straighten, and throw him in the bin on the down low, because they read he was going to do all this stuff at the sorority house. So instead of calling the cops, because I embarrassed the cops on their Facebook and page and made them release more information. Instead of calling the cops, they decided to drive there, and by the time they got there, the deed had been done. So they didn't call the cops until after, because they figured they had a day to grace, just handle it themselves to avoid the embarrassment of an arrest. And the shrink had, Linderman, I think his name was, he had 24 hours under California law to report any kind of death threat, and violate some psychologist patient privilege, but he had 24 hours, to do it and be within the law.
Now, in your research into all this, have you looked into the incel computer?
Because I wrote about this a long time ago, about the Elliot Roger thing.
Yeah.
I wrote about this. I looked at that timeline and, squeezed the cops on this. And that was part of the interest. There were other stuff that I had written about that that I posted on Scribd, and I put them all together and got that book together after I did the book on Nickolas Cruz.
Now, have you looked into this whole thing about this incel community, these involuntary celibates that? Yeah. Now, what the hell's going on with that? Because I mentioned
they're like, they have all of this language, a virile guy is a Chad. I think their genitals are like hanging chads. We don't call them incels in Brooklyn. We call them limp dick F's. And if they really wanted to engage in sexual intercourse, you know what I recommend? Let them go to the place. Let them go to a whorehouse, or engage a prostitute, So that's, because I know in Brooklyn, back in the 1950s, the kids who were lucky enough to have Italian fathers, when they reached a certain age, the father would take them to a prostitute who would show them the ropes. I remember one of my friends wanted to get laid, so we sent him to a prostitute to show him the ropes, and she ended up tying him up for 24 hours. But,
what about a thread of? Have you noticed?
They're making excuses for their own a lack of being social. You know, they don't. Sex isn't, you know, granted to them by the government or something, or an entitlement.
Yeah, it seems like these kids today, they're so isolated with their iPhones and their computers, and they stay home, and they don't have the normal social interaction that we had as teenagers, you know? But now, I'm curious, though, about the Nazi thread, because you used to be the head of, I don't know if you still are, but the head of the Jewish Defense Organization. I don't know if you're still...
I'm not the head. I'm I'm the special senior research section.
Okay, senior research. Now, what did you come up with?
You know, dirty tricks.
Yeah, that's a fact. Now, what about any connection with these shooters? They all seem to have this like neo-Nazi fascination as well.
Yeah. Like, you know, Cruz, he was in a Nazi chat room and he's saying, "Oh, I'm glad I never met my mother because, you know, my adopted mother told me she was Jewish and Jews want to control the world." And he had a swastika on his book bag and something that says, "I hate niggers" or something, you know, scrawled on there too. And then he etched swastikas on the magazines that he used.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which makes me wonder, you know, when did he do this? You know, because Mrs. Sneed, Kimberly Sneed, says she got up in the morning and he says, "Oh, I'm not going to school. It's Valentine's Day." And then he says, he told two stories. He told Jameson he was going to the movies, and he told her he was going fishing. You know, and she was home that day because she had done a night shift the night before. So I can't see him scratching the swastikas on the magazines then and there. He must have done it before, and the magazines must have been in with the guns in the safe. So James Sneed must have seen the Nazi insignia, the swastika, on the magazines. You know, and he didn't do anything about it because he wanted Cruz's money. He was going to inherit $1 million. And the caller, the Massachusetts caller, said that he said he was going to invest it for Cruz, you know, when and they were living in a trailer, and you know, they had in a good part, they had the worst you know, house in a good part of Florida. So, you know, then he wouldn't even take, the Sneeds wouldn't take calls from the Massachusetts caller. And, you know, when Nickolas was kicked out of the one place, what's her name? Roxanne Deschamps, because he was, you know, threatening them, you know, threatening their lives. You know, he said he's going to come back with a gun. They had a fight about something. She wouldn't drive him somewhere. They had a big fight, and he says, "I'm going to come back and, you know, kill you." And he takes and he was going to pick up a gun that he'd ordered. So before he left, he took a couple of bullets with him. So she called the cops, and the cops stopped him. But he claimed that they were chasing him down the road, and he was out of breath, blah, 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 a whole BS story. So when Sneed came to pick up the stuff, you know, when he was going to move into Sneed's around early December, she must have warned him, "Hey, this guy is dangerous. You know, we had to call the cops." You know, and yet he still let him have access to the guns. And Sneed said he tried to get Cruz back into Stoneman Douglas, but they wouldn't let him back. And, you know, didn't they warn him, the people there, you know, that he was kicked out for violence, and, you know, other times he had bullets in his knapsack. I have a video of him bringing bullets into the high school and showing it to the other kids.
How did you get that? From the other kids? Where'd you get that from?
No, I infiltrated some pro Nickolas Cruz Twitter feeds.
Wow.
Pretending to adore him or something, and was able to copy it from Twitter.
Okay. Well, this is a good time to take a commercial break. Okay. And we'll be right back.
Cool.
Yeah. We're with thank you, AJ. We'll be right back with more of AJ Webberman.
I'm going to check the cupcakes. I'm going to take them.
Great. Thank you, man. That's it. People love that. Last time we talked about the French fries. AJ Webberman, from Coup d'etat in America. I don't know how many books he's written, hundreds. Did a great book about Jerry did it, about the JFK assassination, the Miscreant, Nickolas Cruz story. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing and distribution, and much, much more. Now, you can get a hold of Subash Technosis by email at info@subhashtechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all those kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with A.J. Webberman. We're talking about the book, The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story. A.J., are you back from your cupcake?
Yeah, I'm here. I took all the cupcakes out and put them in the freezer.
Okay, great. I only need you for about another 10 minutes. Let me ask you this now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate when you come on the show. You're a national treasure, A.J., whether you realize it or not. I know you have a big opinion of yourself, but I have a bigger opinion of you. Let me ask you a question. What about all these people who see this stuff? You see these online conspiracy theories as a false flag, and this kid Hogue is a crisis actor. Now, you immersed yourself into this. What is your opinion?
Well, my buddy Joel Gilbert was, trying to get me to go on InfoWars. So I told him, forget it. I ain't going to do it. They're sick people that there's a message there that, the Sandy Hook thing didn't happen.
Right.
It was actors then, they have another Holocaust, and that didn't happen either. It's kind of a form of Holocaust denial, and a mini Holocaust denial, in a sense. And Alex Jones says he doesn't believe it. And in that divorce suit, he said, I'm just an actor.
Right.
So, there's a message behind it. It's not just delusional. It's far more sinister.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to have you one day come back and get into the whole Holocaust denial and stuff, because there's a rise of that too as well. There's a rise of anti-Semitism in this kind of coded globalists, Zionists. This
Rothschilds.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. Because it's getting more acceptable with people. I wanted to ask your opinion on this phenomenon, this QAnon that you see on 4chan.
Yeah.
Well, what do you make of this nonsense?
It's like an alternative to Twitter, right?
Yeah. But what do you make of QAnon? This guy, he's supposed to be an insider.
Just people talking to each other who, all have the same beliefs. They're not reaching any people who might have differing beliefs to influence them. So it's a waste. I know Dr. Corsi goes on there all the time.
Right. Yeah, and he's a supporter of this, or at least he was, of QAnon. Are you familiar with the Q?
He is a supporter. He is.
Yeah.
He's a strange dude. He has all my books. I had to autograph them for him. I had lunch with him at the Harvard Club at one point. So, he admits certain things. Like he says, that picture of Hemming and Oswald, that kind of clinches it. Yeah, he sticks to the LBJ did it line.
Right.
Because he would never go against the Republicans. He's a diehard Republican. He was in Flamingo Park in 1972 when we were there, but he was spying on us, for law enforcement administration. I thought that was funny.
Hey, did you ever have any contact with Roger Stone?
He came to the Yippie Museum once.
Really?
With, what's his name? I forget his name. Somebody was married to Margie Ratner from BAI.
Oh, I can't think
anyway,
of it.
He was brought around. Somebody brought him around. A friend of the guy on the Munsters.
Oh, yeah, Al Lewis, Grandpa Al Lewis.
Al Lewis, a friend of Al Lewis, brought him around to the Yippie Museum Cafe, and he asked Aaron Kay, if he could buy pot, if he wanted to buy pot from him. But Aaron refused because of his politics.
Oh, so wait a minute. So Roger Stone had a pot connection?
He lived about 20 blocks from here, actually.
Yeah.
I can't pinpoint him exactly, but I know Joel visited him once, and he was at some place on 77th. So.
Joel who?
Joel Gilbert.
Oh, now you're saying that Roger Stone had a pot connection? He was trying to cut a deal?
No, Roger Stone came to the Yippie Museum Cafe.
Right.
In other words, I got a charter for the Yippie Museum. We were going to preserve all kinds of Yippie memorabilia like, Jerry Rubin's Road Pizza, stuff like that.
Right.
And, all old underground newspapers and buttons and history of the Yippies. We're going to do that. So we had the Yippie Museum, which never really came to pass, but the Yippie Cafe sure did. Yippie Museum Cafe. And so we had acts there all the time. Roseanne visited there once.
Really?
And, yeah. And so Roger Stone came around and he checked the place out, dug some of the acts. And then Aaron was sitting in the front there and he asked Aaron, if he could get him some pot.
Okay.
And Aaron turned him down because of Roger Stone's politics.
So Aaron turned down selling pot to Roger Stone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so now we only got a couple minutes left. What are you working on next? What are you working on right now?
What am I working on now? Well, a really weird thing. It's not a full-time venture, but, they had Starbucks said they were going to allow people to use the restrooms and sit there as long as they wanted to, even without buying anything.
Are you going to move in?
But you know what I done did? I made a list of all the Starbucks in New York. I'm going to attach it, and then I'm going to print this out. And it has advised to the homeless people why sit around the subways, why shit in the street when you can sit in Starbucks and use the restrooms for as long as you want. And, I'll put a quarter on each one. I'll tape a quarter to each one that I distribute. So that's my latest project, is to show how ridiculous, this political correctness is, and that it's all BS and all talk, and it can never really work in practice. It's like communism, it was a good idea in theory, but in practice it didn't work out so well. Same with globalism.
Oh, right. Okay. That's the last question I was going to ask you. Thanks for reminding me. Okay. What do you make of all this stuff? People saying that Trump is under attack by the deep state and it's all,
there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
The deep state is, I think Peter Dale Scott.
Yeah.
One that coined that one.
Yeah. I had Scott on the show.
He, it's like the entrenched. It's like the entrenched bureaucracy, the ones that are there year after year, no matter who's in office. That, like Angleton is a good example. He was in longer than anyone, in the CIA, except for maybe somebody who cleaned the toilets there or something,
Right.
But, it's the entrenched bureaucracy. And Obama's put a lot of people in. He hired people along racial and political lines. And he was there for 8 years, had a lot of time to do it. And, they don't like him because he's not an establishment guy. Their job is to maintain the status quo. And he's, in a way, redistributing some of the wealth to more of middle-class America.
And do you think he colluded with the Russians? And these guys up to his neck in Russians.
Yeah, he looked, they looked to Russia as someone that's trying to preserve Western civilization and that doesn't allow Muslim immigration, and keeps the things the way they always were in the tradition of the Europe and the West that created, a very sophisticated, perhaps the most sophisticated of all civilizations.
Well, on that note, yeah. On that note, we're out of time.
Hey, call me, I called this lady, Carol Adder up. When Comey was younger, when he was 17 years old, there was a break-in, and this Ramsey rapist came into his house and broke in.
Right.
And he was there with his brother, and he went outside, called the cops, and then they hired some tracker to find the guy, some bogus, shaman type guy. And, he took a picture, the tracker took a picture with a telephoto lens of the adder, and, they arrested him, and the only one, and then they put him in a lineup, and the only one who picked him up out of the lineup was Comey. So Carol Adder is convinced that Comey tried to frame her late husband in order to gain an entree into the law enforcement world and be a big hero, a grandstander, a showboater, even at that age.
AJ, we're out of time. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And whenever you have a new book or something like that, hit me up and I'll put you right back on the air, okay?
All right, cool, man.
Thank you, AJ.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
Good night. There you go. The great AJ Webberman. The book is The Miscreant, the Nickolas Cruz story. If you like the show, check out our members section. By the way, I'm going to be doing one of those after shows, those commentary shows that I do. It's a new program we're doing. A new segment we're doing. I'm going to be doing a little half-hour after show of every show interview I do with my commentary on the interview and the guest and little things like that, little tidbits that I couldn't get in while the guest is talking. But check out OppermanReport.com, become a member, and that's where you have access not only to the after the member shows, the member section shows, the exclusive content there, but also to the exclusive content that we're going to have in our commentary section, a whole new section added. You got an abundance of interviews and shows and commentary at OppermanReport.com. Contact me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com to get it done. And now a word from our sponsors.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
WPR Rebuttal, covering the sides of the story missed by Wisconsin Public Radio, bringing you narratives the UW System Board of Regents won't allow, shedding light on perspectives the owners of WPR don't want you to hear. Every Thursday at 12:30 Central Time, WPR Rebuttal is your destination for grassroots journalism in Sauk County and beyond. Our host, Senator JPO, provides insightful analysis into stories that are only superficially covered by mainstream press. A recent inventory of topics includes college graduate underemployment, yellow journalism in the media, and favoritism in the public sector hiring process. Get your WPR Rebuttal fix Thursdays at 12:30 Central Time.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap! I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
At gmail.com.